why do we think Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister? And do we think that it's a case of charisma? That he actually has this mystical quality?
Well, you see, does he actually have charisma, or has he been endowed with charisma by the media? Everyone's saying, but it's just Boris, and the choice that people use to call him Boris and not the Prime Minister and not Mr. Johnson and not, when the press would talk about Corbyn as Corbyn. They wouldn't talk about him as Jeremy or Jezza, like some of us might have done.
Yeah.
And Boris has always been Boris, this character, rather than obviously the charismatic.
It all goes back. When I first saw him, it was on
Have I Got News?
Have I Got News for You? And they ripped into him incredibly. But he played this buffoony character.
Yeah.
I just wonder if whether he does that when he's at home, whether he just slips into serious mode when he's at home, when he's out of the...
I try not to think about Boris Johnson at home.
Not
when you think about Boris Johnson at home, there's usually flames licking up the inside of his curtains.
That is quite a horrific image to be left with.
So wandering around in his underpants, sort of thing.
Hang on.
He does that quite a lot anyway, with those kind of man shorts, doesn't he?
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, Boris's fashion sense is all over the shop,
Isn't it just?
But I think the interesting thing is that he's obviously seen a gap in the market in politics, because there is definitely a charisma gap in the market in British politics. I think there's been a real kind of lack of any kind of personality in politics for a long time, and I think he's definitely twigged on that, and kind of latched onto that, and then manufactured this kind of larger than life character around it. Because I mean, come on, let's.
Do you think it's associated with him, and how much to do with the role and the creation of we need somebody to play this foolish role in British politics? People are all too fed up of being lectured by worthy people.
Yeah, he might have originally perceived it to be a disadvantage, but actually, he's come at it left field. Well, let's turn it into an advantage. I mean, it can't possibly be purely an act. There must be some part of it. Is that this some sort of buffoony kind of, and has this cultivated stutter that he could get away with it because he's got a posh
The stutter that he turns into Latin quite regularly.
Yeah.
And his jowls just start going.
Hick, hike, honk.
Yeah. I mean, it'll get to a point where there'll be a sort of, a whole subsection of language, like, based around Borisisms, He gets to the point where it's sort of like, yeah, I think there was a word I could catch in there, but it was generally just a series of noises and...
Yeah. Do you remember Bill and Ben? Are you two young people?
I'm aware of their work.
I'm aware of them.
I've been to a museum. I have heard of them.
Yeah, we're down with the kids.
Contemporary referencing there, Jerry.
Yeah.
Mate, aren't they? Bill and Ben, the acid years. With little weed.
When I think about
fools in politics, but there's nobody, I don't think, who's made it this side of the pond anyway.
I was going to say, that's on the other side.
Quite such a central thing and such an asset.
You see, for me, I think we talk about, you just mentioned there the other side of the pond, and I guess that's a reference to George W. The thing being with George W., the thing that's different is there was no question in my mind that he wasn't a fool. He was definitely playing the fool. There's no way you get to fly multi-billion-dollar aircraft in the American Air Force, which he did, and be an idiot.
Yeah, that was his dad. George W. Bush was a draft dodger.
Oh, that's true. That's true. He was a dodger, wasn't he?
You're thinking of his
Yeah,
dad.
King George,
George
on the
was
road.
You fooled.
the man that ran the CIA.
Yeah, true. But how do you get into that position and be a fool? Can you work your way through that and be a fool? Can you get to that seat of power and be an idiot?
Yes, quite clearly.
I mean,
But talking of across the pond, though, there's there's more than a handful of similarities between Johnson and Trump.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in terms of their intelligence levels or anything like that, but in terms of seeing the value in the currency in controversy. And I think even if you go back to Boris's days as a journalist, he would throw stuff out there with just
Make it up.
Gleeful abandon, because it was to stir things up. It was to cause a bit of a stir when he was writing these articles about the European Union.
But if you think about his statements, his kind of racist statements, the things about women who wear hijabs, that is playing to a certain kind of, it's a bit like Farage as well does that. This idea of, I'm only, these politically correct, worthy, liberal people, no sense of humour, they're just sort of
doing good.
do-gooders, and
let's use the politically correct term, snowflake libtards. I think.
Libtard?
Yeah.
That's new. Snowflake.
That's what we're getting called.
It's a very Twitterish term, isn't it?
It is. That is. Yeah. That's well used.
Twitter.
Oh right.
That's what you call it. Where all the rednecks live.
Where all the bad things happen.
Where the wild things are.
I'm trying to think if there was anyone, before, in previous eras who was like a humorous, if you like, politician. I'm trying to think if there's any. I can't.
Well, I think there have been, but they've been awarded that because when they do give a light touch, you appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's put it this: I can't imagine Clement Attlee doing a cracking stand-up routine that way.
Can you imagine a set at the Comedy Club by the Beast of Bolsover? I certainly can.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That would kill.
He's
I'll pay for that. Can you get
it? He's awarded his ability to be funny because he knows what he's talking about, and he's got the intelligence and the fight to back that up almost. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is different. It's a different kind of charisma to Boris.
He's earned his right to be irrelevant.
Yeah, Dennis is allowed to do whatever he likes.
Irreverent, did you say, or irrelevant?
Irreverent. That was the word I was looking
for.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anyone else. I mean, apart from but Dennis was always very much an outsider.
Yeah.
Not of the political establishment. Can you be of the political establishment, whether Tory or Blairite type Labour, or can you be of the political establishment and be a fool, a licensed fool,
or play the fool? Or
yeah, I mean, because
is Boris a watershed, and actually that will be allowed now. Because it's worked, you know what I mean? It's hoodwinked the public.
Yeah,
and we've also become much more to a populist type of politics, which is don't tell me what to think, don't tell me what's right and wrong. I have this gut feeling that X, Y, and Z, and don't tell me about vaccines or
saw it on the internet
masks or any other imposition on my right to infect the rest of the world.
Yeah. It's the misnomer of freedom of speech, isn't it? The idea of freedom of speech is not that you can say it's that you can say what you want, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a good morality, or just because you can say it doesn't mean you should. And if you just willy-nilly say it because you were allowed to say it by law or by political.
But also they respond incredibly snowflake-like, don't they? these people who talk about, you know, oh, it's my right to
Oh, yeah.
do this and that. You know, if you make fun of them in a way that is not friendly, if you just deride them because you think they're complete idiots and dangerous idiots, then they get immensely.
Yeah. Don't they? What's the term? It's gammon, isn't it? It's that kind of, you know,
Yeah.
I'm allowed to be angry and upset about all these things, but you're not allowed to be angry and upset about all these things.
Mm.
Snowflake.
Snowflake libtard.
Yeah, it's ironic really when you think about it. It's that kind of like you know, it's a kind of double standard sitting at the heart of all of that, which
Which just screams of the mainstream printed press, doesn't it? Excuse me, I'm just going to close my curtain, get the sun off my face. It screams of the. It's the same thing in, you know, in the Sun or the Mail or any of those, you know, rags. That it kind of goes, we're allowed to be angry about all these things that upset our notion of Britishness or whatever they're worried about, but you're not allowed to.
You're a traitor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was a high point just after Boris got elected as Tory leader, before he was sort of elected Prime Minister, as it were, when he did all the, you know, the proroguing of Parliament and that stuff. And there was a complete outrage that, you know, the courts, I think at one point the Lords, you know, the appeal courts weren't doing the thing that the right-wing press wanted to happen.
Yeah.
And so they were screaming about, you know, these are the enemies of the people, traitors, you know.
well,
And it's kind of like very double standardy.
yeah. I'm just thinking. I mean, you know, going back to the sort of premise of the discussion about it, you know, is charisma, and I can't remember how you worded it, Jerry, but do you think that Boris Johnson could have been a successful politician, successful to the point of becoming Prime Minister or being in the cabinet in a sort of previous political era, you know, say 30, 40 years ago? Because I'm not sure that kind of
No.
that
I'm
kind
not
of
even sure 5 years ago, to be honest.
right.
When we talked about Have I Got News for You, every now and then you watch, you know, the old versions on Dave, and it's really quite salutary to see something from pre the referendum. So what was that, 2016?
Yeah.
And they do talk about the notion of Boris Johnson being Prime Minister as utterly laughable.
Yeah.
Like inconceivable. And the world has changed so much in those 5 years. It's
now our reality, yeah.
Breath away, really.
Well, there was a Simpsons episode with President Trump on, wasn't there, in about 1998 or something?
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things that's quite interesting about it is that unlike Trump and Farage and others of their ilk, where they sort of talk about it's the fact that they've got these personalities which gets them into their positions, but also they've got where they are by kind of selling the idea. It's the draining the swamp notion. You know, we need to get rid of the establishment, even though they are the most establishment politicians. You know, you couldn't get more establishment than Trump. You couldn't get more establishment than Farage. You know, a former banker. You know, a billionaire and a former banker, whatever. You can't get more establishment than them. But their personalities won out because they're promising that they're going to get rid of the establishment. Whereas Johnson never promised that, did he? He's kind of continued to be a complete Etonian. And he's just tried to show maybe, and that was maybe a really clever move, getting on to, you know, Have I Got News for You and all that kind of thing. It's kind of here I am. I'm a man of the people, even though I'm still an Etonian, and I'll still speak Latin at you if I get confused, and I'll still do all these things. But I am still a man of the people. We Etonians can still be people of the people. I mean, it's a very interesting difference to the approach of getting that character.
And on the other side, you've got the difference between, say, Johnson and Farage on one way, and on the other side between Johnson and, say, Rees-Mogg, who you know,
Why?
only speaks
What?
in Latin. And
Say that another 4 times, he's going to appear, right?
Yeah.
Don't, surely you have a kibosh on saying, nearly said it yourself. The Victorian ghost of a sickly man will just be at my window.
I'm just been listening to the Sandman. There is a connection somewhere along the line, and I always, in my mind, I see Rees Mogg as a kind of cartoon, a sort of dark cartoon strip, you know, comic strip entity, you know, that he's a portal for evil or something, but in this rather kind of comic stickman kind of Victorian
sort of one of Scrooge's ghosts.
Yeah.
Ghosts of Christmas.
I see him as much more banal than that.
Okay, yeah,
But like he's like the archetypal loss adjuster for an insurance company. Just like a sort of blank slate of a human being, you know, that is just there to kind of add up the numbers, do the equation, and explain.
On a slate, on a slate with a chalk.
Exactly. Yeah.
An abacus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or I could actually see him as Mr.
The child
Burns.
catcher.
Is it Burns?
Mr. Burns.
Incy Wincy Spider? What's the hand movement?
What is that?
He always does this, doesn't he?
Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
Burns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Release the hand. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So Rees Mogg. Could Rees Mogg ever be Prime Minister?
We've been going on for about 20 minutes. Do we think that's a good?
Feels more like 20 hours so far.
I think Hugo's got the question for the next session, though.
What? Could Rees Mogg ever be Prime Minister?
Mister.
Could Rees Mogg ever be Prime Minister?
That's it. You've said it 4 times now.
Oh God!
I think that's a good place to finish.